Welcome to the Hockey Writers Prospect Corner, a show with our top prospects writing crew, bringing you the latest news, analysis, scouting reports, mocks, rankings, and much more. From the World Juniors to the NHL draft floor, from the farm to the NHL, our team covers everything that happens in the world of prospects. So sit back, grab a notebook, and get ready for Prospect Corner.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of Prospect Corner here at the Hockey Writers. I'm your host, Matthew Zator, and as always, joined in by other prospect experts here, Peter Baracchini and Dayton Reimer. Peter, how's it going? We're continuing the our summer series here, and we're into August now as everyone's watching this, and hockey is I don't know about right around the corner, but a month away. It's we're gonna start having a bit more talk about about stuff. It's been pretty quiet though. So how's it going?
Yeah, it's going great. I mean, we're still doing team content right now, talking about, going through our spotlight of the 2024 draft and prospect pools. Hlinka Gretzky's just around the corner. Rosters are starting to get released, so that's a good sign that, NHL hockey's still about a ways away, but you know what? We still get, the draft content for the 2025 season. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, next week when we do our episode, we will have a day in the books of the Hlinka Gretzky. It starts on the 5th. So we'll have some stuff to talk about. So that's going to be good. And Dayton, how's it going?
Also pretty good, yeah. Was checking out some of the Hlinka Gretzky rosters. Noticed that, of course, Canada has not announced theirs yet, but the Americans have theirs, the Swedes have theirs, the Finns have theirs. Some interesting names are going to be at the tournament, so that'll be fun.
For sure. Yeah, maybe we'll do a quick part of our quick fire. We'll talk a little bit about some of the rosters that have been released. So, but we're going to start or continue our series here, and we're into the Montreal Canadiens and another exciting prospect pool. They've got quite a few exciting names, and they added a lot of guys to their pool at the 2024 draft too, and a couple really good prospects. So we'll start with their first pick. And that was, of course, Ivan Demidov, 5th overall. And super ecstatic, I'm sure, Canadiens fans were when he was still available and they picked him, especially after Michkov. Everyone was kind of hoping that they would pick him, but looks like Demidov was their target from last year even too. And I'm sure they didn't want to be in the position to be able to draft him, but it was expected. So Dayton, what did you think about the pick? His potential in the NHL? I mean, there is talk that he could potentially be in the NHL sooner rather than later, especially with all the Michkov stuff with the KHL, that it's more of a possibility that he could be playing a lot sooner. So your thoughts on that pick?
Yeah, I think it was the pick that was always going to happen unless somebody in the top 4 really liked him. But no, I thought Canadiens getting Demidov is just a good fit for both sides. They get a really talented goal scorer, a guy who's really patient with the puck. He's got the ability to draw in defenders and attackers and create space just by being one of the most dominant players on the ice. He really controls the flow of the game. He's really creative. There are some questions, of course, about some of his defensive pressure, but he doesn't take his foot off the gas. He just looked a little bit overwhelmed in the KHL last season. And I think that's probably where some of the speculation has come that he might be coming over this coming season. If he's not going to get a spot in the KHL, or if he's not getting enough playing time, there have been some reports and some speculations that the Canadiens might try to negotiate a deal with SKA to bring him in early, or at least earlier than expected. And it's definitely possible. The KHL is now an independent league, so it's not connected with the Russian government anymore. And those contracts are negotiable. And because Demidov, I believe, has a year or 2 left on his current deal. Let me just check that. It's 1 year left. So it expires at the end of the season. At the very least, he will be over in 25-26 because there have been numerous reports that he will be with the Canadiens after his KHL contract expires.
That's going to be exciting. We have Michkov in the NHL this season and Demidov potentially next season. That's two really high-end Russians, young Russians coming into the league. Next wave post Ovechkin, Malkin, those guys. And of course, they're still in the NHL, but this is the next wave coming up. So this is going to be fun to see how they are. And not just them. There's quite a few other Russians. We talked about a couple, that one that's going to be drafted this coming 2025 draft too. So lots of excitement coming up for Russians in the NHL. So yeah, we'll see what he does. Maybe this season. Let's have to see. Right, going into their second first round pick, that's 21st overall, and that was Michael Hague. Very exciting addition too, later in the first round, and this brings more depth to their forward group. We're going to talk about coming up in their prospect pool overall. But Peter, what do you think about Hague going to the Canadiens? Especially, I don't know, this is probably where he was supposed to go in the first round, but the Canadiens getting him and then just adding to Demidov, pretty impressive.
Yeah, I was on the Michael Hague train from the very start, and even in towards the end, he was in my top 15, kind of like in the same range with Becca Seneca, although he went top 3, but didn't expect Hague to go that high, but I would still take him in the top 15 regardless. But yeah, really, first and foremost, it was a feel-good story. Um, Overcoming a lot of adversity, injuries, the passing of his father, the fact that, I mean, there were some shows with behind the scenes looks, and you saw the emotion when Hague got the call from the Montreal Canadiens that they selected him. I mean, just absolutely overflowing with joy, emotion, and everything like that. Really happy for him for that. But overall, I mean, he was also growing up as a Habs fan, so it's, makes it that even more special. So it's always a feel good story to see that kind of emotion and, getting selected by the team that you grew up idolizing. But overall, I think the main point for the Habs is going by full on skill. Mm-hmm. There was no doubt about that. You couldn't pass up on Demidov. And with the skill that Hague has that, he's shown, especially during the second half of the season, where he really popped off, had one of the better point per game rates in the second half of the USHL with the Chicago Steel, really showed that, not necessarily the work ethic, the skill, the hands, and the ability and pace, or the ability to play at a fast pace, really stood out in a big way. And a lot of us were hoping that he would be on the U18 team. Unfortunately, he didn't make the cut, which big question mark, but Canada was really stacked anyways. Mm-hmm. But having Hague on that team would have made them even more lethal and more dangerous. But, I digress. But the fact that you have another highly skilled forward at your disposal to go along with Demidov really showed the direction that they wanted to go and nail those first 2 picks. And I really thought that they did. I mean, yeah, there's going to be some current concerns about, the decision making and everything like that. But the way that he executes, and even before then, like, looking at some of his play before coming to the USHL too, and like, summer leagues and everything like that, he was by far the best player with his hands, knowing where to be at the right time, the execution of making moves at the right time. It was absolutely phenomenal back then, and it's carried over right now. So a lot of work to be done, but the skill and the potential that he has is absolutely phenomenal.
Well, I mean, I mentioned it in our first round recap that I loved that pick, and I meant, that feel good story too. And mm-hmm. It was just overall a great story to coming in. And he's going to the University of Michigan in 2025-26.
That's gonna be fun.
So there's another great player adding to that university, which they just pump out NHL players, and that's just a great college to be going to, or university to be going to for Hague. And I'm excited to watch him there. Not this coming season, but next season. And yeah, it's going to be fun to see what he can do with that group of players. They've got quite a big talent pool every year too. So yeah, great pick. All right, jumping to the third round. They didn't have a second round pick. And I love this story too, because they get a son of a legendary player for the Canadiens, Atos Koivu, at 70th overall. Of course, his dad was Saku Koivu, is Saku Koivu. And Dayton, what do you think about that pick? It kind of was something maybe you thought, yeah, that could work.
Yeah, just like I hoped that Calgary would get Iginla, I was hoping that Koivu would go to Montreal. And while the first thing didn't happen, thankfully the Canadians drafted Atos Koivu. And that, I don't know, it just feels right, right?
Yeah.
Of course, his dad, Saku Koivu, being a longtime Montreal Canadian, one of their probably most beloved captains of the last 2 decades, I think would be, I don't think that's crazy to say. Um, yeah, unfortunately, didn't have a lot of success in Montreal. Atos could maybe change that. He is a fantastic goal scorer. He's got some pretty good hockey sense, pretty good two-way abilities. He's very competitive. The big question, and the reason he was a third round pick, was he doesn't really have the physical tools quite yet. And he's not really much of a playmaker, so he would need somebody to feed him the puck. But once he gets it, you can pretty much expect it to go into the back of the net. He had pretty good stats in Finland. Made 4 games in the Liga, which is always a promising thing for a drafted player, especially in their draft year. Didn't get any points in that, but in the under 20 league with TPS, he had 31 points, 16 goals in 28 games, along with 7 points in 10 playoff games. So he does know how to put up points. And I think there is some promising signs for his physicality at the under 18s, where he had a whopping 27 penalty minutes in 5 games. I can't remember the specifics, but I think there was some other reasons why it was so high. Um, yeah, I think it's a great pick. It's a little bit of a project, but it has some excellent potential to make a middle six forward who can put in points and really support a well-rounded team.
One thing about the Canadians, they've been able to hit on a few late round picks or mid round lately. I mean, it seems like they have a scouting staff that are able to find these guys, and Koivu, especially with the bloodlines. I mean, it's not like he may pan out, he may not. I mean, it's not guaranteed. Your dad's an NHL player, you're going to be good too, but it's usually happens. I mean, there are a lot of examples where it hasn't, but yeah, I like the pick, just the fact that there's that connection. So yeah, really good one. All right, their second third round pick was Logan Sawyer, another forward, played for in the BCHL, the Brooks Bandits, AJHL, now the BCHL, and they played in both leagues because of that whole thing where the teams changed. But Peter, what did you think about that pick? Again, third round pick going to Providence College in 2025-26, another NCAA bound player. But what did you think about that one?
Yeah, when you look at the two leagues, it kind of feels that, it looks like it's a separate year, but it's the same year, just two different leagues because of the switch over and everything that happened. So he played in 59 games, 78 points, but it's the playoff production that really stands out as well. 12 games played, 15 points, including 7 goals. And when you're in that mid-round range or you want to catch the eye of scouts and teams, you want to make sure that you elevate and rise up to the occasion in important games. And he did just that. I mean, he's got great size, 6'1", 173, but when you look beyond that, it's the work ethic, it's the motor, it's the energy that he provides every single shift, that he's the type of player that doesn't give up on a play. And that's what teams want, especially when you want to try and find those players that can be not necessarily a diamond in the rough, but those mid-round, hits that can play a factor later on. And he's very well versed on both sides of the puck too. Smart defensively, has the offensive skill set and the ability to create the attack. Really interesting pick to see how it's going to play out. But, this is one pick that really, you could kind of get a sense that maybe there were some other well-known names that they could have taken, but they settled with him because there's definitely something to like about him.
Well, you always need those bottom 6 guys. I mean, he probably won't be a top 6, but yeah, you need the work ethic and those types of guys too. I mean, the playoffs is a big thing to already be performing in that high pressure. I mean, yes, it's junior, but I mean, it's a good sign for the future. So yeah, good third round pick for the Canadiens there. All right, just running through the rest of their picks in the late round. If we wanted to touch on a few, I'll give you guys the floor after this. But fourth round, they went with Owen Protz, a defenseman. Fifth round, they had two picks, Tyler Thorpe and Mikas. Oh my gosh, Mikas Vinkvanaj. I probably butchered his name. Latvian goaltender in the fifth round, 134th overall. And then going to the sixth round, Ben Merrill at 166 overall. And in the seventh round, they had a couple picks, forward Makar Kainen and Rasmus Bernqvist, 210 and 224. So I'll start with you, Dayton. If you wanted to touch on any of those names more, if you've seen them or you have a bit more insight on a couple of those or one or two of the names, I'll give you the floor here and kind of dive in there.
Sure. I think out of that group, the most interesting is Ty Thorpe with the Vancouver Giants. He is a 6'5" forward who had a very good season until he got injured, and you probably can speak a little bit more on that. Him being he plays right in your backyard. So 23 goals and 44 points in 51 games. Had 30 penalty minutes. He's a solid player. He's got a good shot, really, really soft hands, and he's not afraid to use his size to create that space and to, push people around. So I think he has maybe the most NHL upside. I'm really intrigued by their goalie, though. Mikas Vekvanags is how I think. It's how I'm going to go with it. He has, let me just pull him up here. I've got way too many tabs and I lost him. Oh no. So pretty good size at 6'3". He was playing in Latvia, had 9 games with their top league, a 908 save percentage, 1 shutout, 907 save percentage in 3 playoff games. Pretty good for an 18-year-old. At the World Junior Under 18s, he had an 894 in 4 games for Latvia, which is always, they're not going to win a lot of games. We don't have to beat around the bush. But he did manage to win one, kind of led their crease there. And I think there's some interesting upside with him in the crease and could maybe challenge for a position with Laval in a couple of seasons.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we'll talk about their goaltenders a little later on. They do got a couple really good names in their system, so adding another one is always good, especially when their pipeline is not the strongest with in the NHL right now. But I mean, for their future, I think there's some intriguing names, so he just adds to that. Peter, what about you? Anyone that kind of stands up from the rest of those names there?
Yeah, I'm gonna go in a different route because if Dayton wasn't gonna pick Ty Thorpe, I was definitely going to. But I don't want to. I mean, I could say a lot about him with the size, the hands, and everything like that. But it's interesting enough because Arbor Jacki just signed a contract today, and we know how physical and how much of a menace he is on the ice. So I am going to go that route and take Owen Protz, the first name that you mentioned, because of that, menacing, violent style of hockey that, he plays with. He's very physical. He's very in your face, and he takes no prisoners, basically, same way like Jacki. Interesting enough, he did get traded from the Sudbury Wolves to the Brantford Bulldogs. Yes, that is correct, because moved away from Hamilton. So many teams are changing in the OHL.
Yeah.
It's hard to keep up at this point. And, when you look at the stats, he only had 7 points with the Wolves, but that increased to 12 with the Bulldogs. And I'm not saying that he's going to be an offensive defenseman because he isn't, but it's great to see that a little bit more of a progression on the offensive side of things with the Bulldogs. And that may not definitely translate to the next level at the NHL, but he knows that he's going to be that shutdown, physical, in-your-face defender that's going to make life miserable for everybody. So not only do they have Arbor Jacki, but they do have another menacing defender in Owen Protz. So it's going to be interesting to see that, you have the skill guys, you have the two-way guys, and now you have those physical in your face guys that could definitely do some damage without the puck regardless. So interesting to see how that's going to play out.
Yeah, they kind of balanced the after going forward heavy in the first couple rounds that they had in the draft. They went and kind of went all over the place, forwards, defense, goaltender, went in a bunch of different directions for the rest of the draft. So overall, they actually had a really good draft class. I mean, some intriguing names, some high skill, some workman-like type forwards too. So overall, I think the Canadiens had a really good draft. Of course, when you have high picks, you're going to have a good one, unless you go way off the board and pick someone that you don't really, everyone kind of like, what? Why'd you do that? But yeah, they got two elite, potentially elite top two line guys in the first round, and then kind of filled it out with maybe some bottom six guys down the road. So, or you could have a surprise and Koivu could turn out to be a first line, second line player too. I mean, that happens. So it's going to be interesting to see and watch them develop and talk about them as we're going to talk about the rest of their prospects now.
I just want to
And
quickly emphasize that when I
yeah,
say violent in regards to Protz's game, I mean he doesn't go about it in an over the top way. He's very steady about how he does it, just like the same way that Stein and Solberg does. They're physical, they're violent, but at the same time they do it in the right way.
yeah, and doing it yeah, like you say, it's clean. It's
Mhm. Yeah.
you're not they're not going and getting suspended for their hits that they do. So yeah, we'll see what happens with those guys because again, you need those types of defensemen as well. You can't just have all skill. You got to have those physical in your face defensemen too. All right, let's move to the rest of their prospect pool and talk about a few of them. And let's start with the forwards. And again, this list is pretty impressive. And I mean, overall, they're a pretty strong pool because they've been drafting in the top 10 for a while here. So Owen Beck, Oliver Kapanen, Sean Farrell, Josh Roy, Philip Mazar. Those are just some of the names, and they're all high-end guys that could potentially be top six. But I'll start with you, Peter. Anyone you want to highlight here of those names or beyond that you want to highlight?
I've talked a bit about, too much. I've talked about Beck too much. I really haven't talked about Oliver Kapanen as much because I really did like him in his draft year. And I thought that was a very smart pick by the Canadiens in the set to end out the second round in 2021. But there were a lot of question marks, a lot of what ifs in regards to his development. But I think this was the best season that we've seen in regards to Kapanen's development. 34 points in 51 games in the Liga and added another was just over a point per game in the playoffs with 14 and 13. And was absolutely a dynamic goal scorer for Finland at the World Championships, where he scored 6 goals in 8 games. Didn't register an assist, but you start to see that goal scoring ability come in because he was always a really good playmaker as well. But now the goal scoring side is starting to take over a little bit. And he reads everything so well that he puts himself in a great spot to take advantage of those opportunities and get into those prime scoring targets or scoring areas. So, I really liked what I saw this season, especially at the international play. I mean, the fact that he was one of like Finland's go-to players at that tournament, believe he was basically their leading scorer overall, 6 points in 8 games, regardless. Just 1 point ahead of Jesse Puljujärvi. So yeah, hopefully that this is a good step for him in the right direction. Hasn't come over or is still staying overseas right now. He's going to be in Timrå in the SHL. So hopefully at some point he makes that jump over because he's already on their contract. Hopefully, if this season goes well, there's an opportunity that you probably come over late next season and join the team in North America. So again, really looking to see how he's going to develop this season.
Signed his entry-level deal in June, so
Mhm.
that's a good sign
Yeah.
coming up, right? And especially don't like it when these guys stay so long without getting their ELC in Europe. You're like, over time, you're like, yeah, he's probably not going to come over. But now that he's signed, yeah, I think there's more of a possibility now that he will be over in North America, probably by the end of this season when his season ends in Finland. So we'll see. We'll have to watch that as the season goes on. Right, Dane, what about you on the forward group here for the Canadiens? I mean, lots of great names, lots of talent. You can touch on any of those big names or even a lesser known guy.
Yeah, well, I thought I was going to touch on a lesser known guy, so I prepared stuff for Kapanen.
Oh,
Of course I did, because that's how we do here. We all prep the same guys.
at least we're on the
Um,
same page, at least.
right? Yeah. He, fantastic tournament at the World Championship. 6 goals,
Oh
8 games. Like that's incredible. Canadians got a good one there. Another one who really I think shot up this year though was Philip Meshar.
yeah.
He was just incredible at the World Juniors with Servac Petrovsky, and they combined on so many plays. Meshar was the one setting things up and sort of getting that puck to the other goal scorers. So he had a team leading 7 assists in 5 games, and that was his second tournament. So he was using that experience, using that leadership, and he was able. Oh no, sorry, it was his third tournament. That's my bad. That was his third time, and of course, his best result. One of the most experienced players on that team, and it showed. He was just excellent. Um, he's got really good speed. He is able to like play a really strong transition game. Is his hands, like I mentioned with Ty Thorpe, he's got really good hands. He's able to move that puck really, really smoothly. With the Kitchener Rangers this year, that's where he played most of the season. He had 45 games, 52 points, 19 of which were goals. Stuck it out in the playoffs with them as well, but added 16 points in 10 games, while also playing 2 games in AHL. So he is ready to make that jump into the pros. It's actually his third season in the AHL. He had 1 game in 22-23. So he's been, I guess, flirting with turning pro for a couple of seasons now. It looks like he's ready. He's got nothing left to prove at the junior level. He is maybe not their top forward, especially not with Demidov in their system, but I think he is one of the most dynamic players and probably top 3
Mhm.
for the forwards among the Montreal Canadiens system.
Yeah, Mezar, Kapanen, two great guys. I mean, and there's so many guys that have graduated, like Sean Farrell's played in the NHL now. Joshua Roy has played in the NHL now. Emil Heinemann's in the AHL. He's been bounced around a bit. He came from the Calgary Flames in the Monahan deal, I believe. And they've got some great names, and it's going to be I think the Canadiens are going to end up being a really good team forward wise coming up because they already have a pretty good young core in the NHL already. And there's all these guys just going to add to it, and it's going to be fun to watch. Owen Beck has just been phenomenal in the OHL since he's won the Memorial Cup. He's had another great season this past one. He's going to probably show up in the top 5 prospects, and he's playing the NHL 1 game because he was called up there in junior, not last season, season before. So I mean, yeah, hey, a lot of these guys are getting ready to hit the NHL and or as maybe early the AHL first, but yeah, it's gonna be fun to watch these forwards develop in Montreal for sure. All right, let's move to more excitement for the Canadians, and that's their defensemen. I mean, they've got quite a few big names here. Lane Hutson being the big one. He's still a prospect. He has not played a lot of NHL games yet. He did play quite a few at the end of the season. Very impressive. David Reinbacher, they're probably their next one coming up, and Logan Mailloux had a great season in the AHL, et cetera, et cetera. They got a few other names there too. So Peter, who do you want to touch on here? I mean, obviously Lane Hutson is the big name, but we have talked about him at length, and I have a question at the end of the show too about him. So, I mean, you can talk about it if you want, but who do you want to focus on?
Um, I'll save everything for the end of the show on Lane Hutson, but then again, we could talk days and days about Lane Hutson. I am going to pick a different defender, and I'm going to talk about Adam Engstrom. Obviously, you kind of need those other not necessarily depth defenders, but obviously the main pieces on your back end are going to be Hutson and Reinbacher for the future. But then you need players in that middle of the lineup that can still have that upside, and Engstrom definitely has that. I mean, he's very mobile. He's got great skill. Um, Look to have improved the speed very much this season, and even as a progressor, there's a positive right there as a puck moving defender. He's got the size as well to shield the puck very well, be a factor in transition, but I'm still a little bit wary on the defense, not necessarily defensive game, but the timing of his reads. Still be a little bit aggressive at times. Maybe needs to pick his spots just a little bit better as a result. But, he's an offensive driver. He gets stuff done on the offensive side of the puck. I mean, you look at his numbers, that's what he's known for. Um, has a really good two-way game, but then again, just needs to time everything and make slightly better decisions as a result. But, this season was pretty good. Second season in the SHL, 22 points in 51 games, pretty decent production. Added another 4 in the playoffs. So he's got that going. He's got that pro experience under his belt right now. He's only 20 years old, so lots of room for growth and development. But you can't deny the puck moving abilities on the back end to go along with what Hutson can do. So, um, you know, he's a less shot defender. Believe Hutson is a less shot defender as well. I'm just going to double check on that. Very quickly if it'll load. Yeah, so they're both left shot defenders. So you already had that left side filled out with two very dynamic puck movers on the back end. One, Hutson doesn't really have the size, but Engstrom does. But, the upside and skill that Hutson has is slightly a little bit more than Engstrom, but he's definitely going to be a piece that could be relied on to fill out that second pairing that could be a big part of the Habs' future. So, really interesting to see what he's going to do this season as well. But he's taken big strides overall on both sides of the puck.
Yeah, I mean, he just beyond. I didn't even have him in my list of key guys. So there you go. He is another guy that's going to end up being part of this core moving forward. They're going to have to trade some of these guys, I think, because they do have a lot of young guys. All right, Dayton, I have a feeling Peter took your guy, but
Did I?
Yeah, he did.
Oh my God.
Yeah. That's like, oh, do another underrated guy. Adam Engstrom.
I should probably just pick the top names from here on out.
Maybe I should pick the top names.
Either or. Someone's got to.
Yeah. Well, I'll talk about another guy who caught my eye, and I was going to save him for later for underrated guys, but why not now? That is Bogdan Konyushkov, who is a 6-foot right shot defender playing in Russia this season. And what jumped out to me was, sure, he's got some pretty decent points, 28 points in 65 games, which is pretty solid for a defenseman. He was Torpedo's captain last season. He's 21 years old, one of the youngest players on that team. So he is definitely somebody who has leadership qualities. He has the ability to play above his age. He is a special prospect, and the Canadiens grabbed him in the 4th round, 110th overall at the 2023 draft. They might have somebody there. He is a very intriguing prospect, and that's somebody I'm going to try to pay more attention to this season. I've heard talk about him, so I looked into him a little bit. Yeah, there's something there for sure.
Yeah, there's another one to add to their many guys. David Reinbacher, I think, is going to end up being in the NHL in the next couple seasons. And there was the controversy, not controversy, but everyone didn't like that they picked him because of Michkov being there. I mean, it wasn't a bad pick because Reinbacher was projected to go in that range, and he's going to end up being a really high-end top pairing defenseman. And you already have Lane Hutson, who looks like a top 4 guy. But Reinbacher, I think, is a definite top pairing. Maybe not franchise defenseman, but a guy that's going to lead the blue line for a long time. And yeah, it may not have been a pick that everyone wanted at the time because everyone wanted Michkov. But in the end, I think Reinbacher is going to end up being a big pillar of this defense in the future. So, and he's hasn't shown any signs of not being that in his development in the last season or so. He's had to deal with some injuries, but overall, I think he's still on track to being that top pairing guy. All right, moving on to goaltending, and they do have some good names in this pool here. And one, Jakub Dobas has been impressive, and then of course Fowler, who had a great World Juniors. I believe it was this past World Juniors, or was the one before? It was this past one. Really high and led US to the gold, and yeah, so there's two great names there. They added of course, the one in the draft here, and they do have some other names. So I'll start with you, Dayton, so that Peter doesn't take. But I mean, there's not as many names here. So who do you want to talk about?
Yeah, well, I'll take the top guy, Jacob Fowler. I think he is set up to be the future in net. Maybe not take Carey Price's throne, because that's a big set of shoes to fill. But he is on track to become the Canadiens' next goalie, and they're preparing for his arrival. And I think you can kind of see that with some of the signings that they've made. I don't think Montembeault is a long-term solution. I think he's good. He'll suffice, but he's a stopgap until Fowler gets there, in my opinion. He had just a fantastic freshman season at the NCAA. He had a .926 save percentage in 39 games, 32 wins, lost 6 times, and only 1 tie or overtime. I can't remember if NCAA still used ties. At the World Juniors, like you mentioned, he was also fantastic. Numbers didn't quite reflect how good he was, but he was undefeated with the Americans in 3 games. He is an explosive mover between the pipes. He's able to get across the crease very, very quickly, and that's how he's able to cut out a lot of shooting lanes. He is very athletic, very technical. He's a fantastic goalie. He's going to be an NHLer someday, and I would bank on sooner rather than later, even though goalies take generally longer than players.
Yeah, what a great season, the NCAA. And of course, I somehow glossed him over and wasn't on my top 10 prospects.
I wasn't going to mention it.
I'll mention it. I will. He will be on the update. I will guarantee that right now. In the next one. And I don't know where I'm going to place him, but he will be there. All right, Peter, who do you want to talk about? Jakub Dobas, again, great season. I mean, numbers wise, actually a pretty good season, and with the Laval Rocket in his first AHL stint. But you want to talk about him, or you can talk about someone else?
Yeah, I am going to talk about Dobas. You look at the numbers that he had in the NCAA, absolutely, lights out. Both seasons he had a save percentage of .915 or better, positive win record. Goals against average below 2.4, 2.26 in his first season, slightly shot up in his second season, but, still good results no matter what. And then this season, yeah, good first rookie stint with the Laval Rocket, and he's basically the placeholder till Fowler comes up. But, you talk about having some depth in the crease. You need to have an abundance of talent. And he's basically shot up past Caden Primo at this point. I mean, obviously he's in the NHL or has gone up into the NHL, but he doesn't seem to be a viable option for the future. Obviously different scenario because we're talking about a rookie. We're talking about a player with, at least some NHL experience, but I really do like the athleticism that he brings. I really like the size. He's really done well at every single, level that he's been at, whether it's USHL, NCAA, and even in the AHL right now. And there's like a good pipeline of goalies coming up through the AHL right now. We've talked about Yaroslav Askarov. Dennis Hill to be on Toronto. Dobas is one of those guys on Montreal that they have a legitimate goalie prospect, and you're going to have another one soon in Fowler coming up, depending or whenever that's going to happen. It may not be long before you have 2 solid goalies and you have that tandem of possibly Dobas and Fowler, solidifying that back end in the AHL before they make the jump to the NHL. So really interesting to see what he does in his second season. I think he's going to be, a player that's not necessarily, I mean, I'm probably going to talk about this later on, but may break out even more than what he already had and improve on what he did. But tough to try and obviously you could always improve on the numbers that he had this season, but good numbers regardless, that it could be a little even better the second time around.
Yeah, those are two great prospects that they got in their system. Fifth round pick, Dobas was Fowler, a third rounder. And they could end up being 1A, 1B down the road. And that's a pretty good to have. Again, we're going to talk about strengths and weaknesses, but Canadians are another team, very solid in all three position groups and have elite talent in all three of them too. So very good, very good prospect pool overall. All right, give the floor. Anyone else we want to talk about? Peter, I'll start with you. Any other names that deserve mentioning before we move on?
Um, Kind of not necessarily a make or break season for Jacob Perreault, but still a decent prospect as a result of his goal scoring. But he has struggled to find any sort of consistency right now. Really feel like you know, uh, not to bring his brother into the equation right now, but it seems like Gabe is being the better Perreault brother as of right now. And obviously, Pearl has Gabe has a little bit more experience, but it just hasn't quite worked out where, I mean, um, not Gabe, Jacob has a little bit more of that pro experience, but having a hard time to try and find what he is at this level, basically. So I think not necessarily time is running out, but he's got to figure out how to take that next step forward because it really hasn't quite shown whether it was with the San Diego Gulls and then he got moved to the Laval Rocket. 2 points in only 13 games since being dealt over there. Um, we know he's a really good goal scorer. We know he could put the puck in the net, but there seems like a lot more question marks that he needs to figure out. Just one name I thought we highlight. We've talked highly about all these other prospects, but this is one prospect that kind of needs to take the next step.
Yeah, he's already been moved from another organization too, so he's gonna have to prove himself again, basically, to another group. And obviously, they see something in him, but we'll see where it goes from here. Dayton, over to you. Who else do you want to talk about here?
I'll quickly touch on Riley Kidney, who was a rookie in the AHL last season. He was an unbelievable scorer in junior. I was just doing a little bit of math because he split 22-23 between Acadie Bathurst and Gatineau. He had 110 points in 60 games, which is incredible. 65 of which he had with Gatineau in just 29 games. And then in the playoffs, he had 22 points in 13 games. The kid could not stop scoring in his 20-year-old season. Fast forward to the AHL last season, things didn't go quite as well. He had 20 points in 65 games. He was looking a little bit more like a perimeter player. He had some defensive concerns. If he can start to add a little bit more strength, he's not undersized, but at 6 foot, 176 pounds is a little bit lacking for the pro level. He could become an incredibly dangerous forward. He is very crafty, very intelligent. He's sneaky, I guess is a good way to put it. He can really create opportunities with the puck whenever he has it. He just needs to not be pressured at the moment. And if he can figure out how to do that, then you have a very interesting forward for the Canadiens to add to so many more of their interesting forwards.
Yeah, those are two good names to mention too. I mean, they've got a pretty good group of players, like mentioned already, that if they're not all going to hit, obviously, but there's a lot to look at that could potentially do it. So, very, very interesting to watch how they all develop in the next season and beyond. All right, this is gonna be tough because top five prospects. There's a lot of guys you can kind of go on. There's probably an obvious number one, but Dayton, who is your top five of the Canadians here?
Yeah, definitely not an easy list to make. So I was working on it as we were talking about him. I think you got to go Lane Hutson number one. I would probably put Reinbacher number two, Demidov number three, and then Meshar and Fowler 4 and 5.
All right, Peter, what about you? Is there a difference? You got different placement or even some new names there?
Slightly different placement. Obviously Lane Hutson is going to be number one. I'm going to have Ivan Demidov at two. Um, Ryan Bacher three, Michael Haig four, and I am going to say Owen Beck at number five because of the two-way play, the speed and the skill that he has. I really think that he really shined for Saginaw, especially even during, the playoffs, but even shined a little bit more during that Memorial Cup. He really stood out in a big way. So I think he deserves to be in the top five.
All right, I'm going Hutson number one. That's obvious. I think he's not going to be on this list next season. Next time we talk about this prospect pool, because he'll be in the NHL all season, I'm assuming. So yeah, Hutson number one. I'm going Demidov too. I think he's got so much upside that he's going to end up being a 40, 50 goal scorer at the NHL, maybe a 40, not 50, maybe 40. At the NHL level, and I'm excited to see what he can do. Ryan Bacher, I'm going with three. I'm going Owen Beck at four, and oh my gosh, it's gonna be tough. Yeah, I'm gonna go Joshua Roy at five. I think he has a lot of upside too, and he played pretty well in the time he was in the NHL. Not very high, big sample size, but I like him. Farrell's close there too, and Fowler. I mean, there's a pretty it's pretty tough to pick a top five, but and obviously all three of ours are probably not wrong. I splitting hairs maybe when you get into the four and five. Yeah, so but that just speaks to the strengths of the prospect pool, which we'll talk about. Peter, what about strengths? I mean, strengths and weaknesses. Do they have any weaknesses? I mean, really, they've got talent at every position. I don't know if they really need to address anything, but what do you find as strengths and weaknesses of this pool?
Yeah, they've really filled out the middle of the ice. I think we saw what we have at back. You saw what we have, or what you have with Michael Haig. That was a good selection. They look really set on the right side as well with Meshar, Debedov, even, Joshua Roy coming up. Um, Defense, you got the balance of everything. The offense, the two-way, the physicality. I think that's really set in stone. Goaltending, we already know that. I think the only weakness would be on that left side. Um, as the forward group, I mean, you could generalize forwards are strengths, but it could also be the weakness because they do look a little bit weak on that left side. But even when you look at their NHL roster or whatever, Juraj Slafkovsky is their only viable left winger that's going to be a top six threat. Um, there's also Raphael Harvey Pinard, Michael Pezzetta. You have those depth guys, but in terms of like blue chip prospects that could make a big impact, don't necessarily know what you have with Luke Tuck, Emil Heineman as well, kind of up and down as well. Although he did have a little bit of a better season this year with the Laval Rockets, so hopefully they can get a little bit more substance in the future. But that to me is just basically the only weakness at this point.
Not a big one. That's not
Yeah.
a huge weakness for sure. Dane, you have anything to add to that about strengths, weaknesses that the Canadians have right now?
No, I think, that's pretty much a great way to say it, right? Like their defense is amazing. Their forward group has some amazing goal scorers. Maybe they could use a few more playmakers, especially in the top six. Like Peter mentioned, they've got Juraj Slafkovsky on the left wing. Not a lot of other top options beyond that. I think, yeah, RHP has just had so many injury issues
Yeah.
that's really limited his impact, and he's looked really good in his brief moments when playing with the Canadiens, but just hasn't been able to string in that consistency because of those injuries. Yeah, no, it's a really good prospect pool.
It is, and the thing is hopefully, I mean, Canadians fans probably don't want to see any more high end picks because they do want to be closer to the playoffs soon. But this rebuild's going pretty well so far, and their core is starting to be formed. You're starting to see who's going to lead this group in the future, and it's an exciting future if you want to see all this potential that all these guys have. And yeah, an exciting pool to follow. All right, quick fire. Peter, I'll start with you. An underrated prospect in the organization right now. Could be someone we've mentioned, or someone we haven't.
Well, I'm gonna take Blake Biondi. This is the guy that I really liked the selection, especially when he was coming out of the high school scene in Minnesota. I thought that was a really good selection in the fourth round in 2020. Taking 109th overall, has got the size, 6'1", 198. Basically can bully over any opponent with that size, with that ability to drive hard to the net, the hands in tight spaces. Really hasn't had the best production at the NCAA level, but hopefully he's able to figure things out. But he's one name that I'm still keeping an eye on because of the potential that he had as a high schooler, and hopefully he can translate that. Um, he's already 4 seasons into his NCAA career, going into his fifth one at the University of Notre Dame now instead of Minnesota Duluth. So see what's going to happen in what could be his final year of collegiate hockey. So hopefully he's able to turn things around and get a little bit more production going because I really was high on him before. Um, Maybe someone that could still be a little bit underrated as a result in the organization based on the depth that they have.
Yeah, I forgot about him. My gosh, they just got so many so many names in their pool that very fun to follow. Dayton, what about you? Underrated prospect in the organization right now.
I'm going to go with Jared Davidson, who was a big part of the Seattle Thunderbirds WHL championship. He put up back-to-back seasons of 80 points, nearly back-to-back seasons of 40 goals in the WHL. He was one of their top scorers in the playoffs. His first season in the AHL didn't go super smoothly, like a lot of rookies. He had 16 points in 38 games. Definitely not bad. 11 which of goals, 11 of which were goals. So he does have some, I think, bottom six potential. He's got some decent size, 6 foot and 183 pounds. I think there is kind of a gritty goal scorer forward that could emerge in Jared Davidson. And I mean, you asked for the most underrated, so I think nobody is talking about him as a potential NHLer. I think he has the skills.
There you go. There's always those guys coming through the system too. All right, Dayton, a prospect that you see having a breakout season. That was an obvious one, of course, but who do you see?
Yeah, since we're going to talk about him in a second here, I was looking for somebody who maybe you didn't expect to have a breakout. And I think Philip Mesar uh, has a great shot at coming into his first full season of the AHL and lighting it up. He has just incredible skills. He's been able to produce at every single level. I don't see him having some of those rookie bumps that we've been talking about.
Yeah, I think he's gonna transition pretty well. Like you say, he's ready. He's ready for pro hockey. I don't think he has anything left to do in junior. He'll do it. I think he's gonna have a good season too. Peter, what about you?
Another player who I think is ready for pro hockey, and that's Owen Beck.
Yeah.
I really think that this is a player that he's shown what he's capable at the junior level. He was always traded or brought in because of the leadership qualities that he brings to the table. I mean, he spent most of his first 2 seasons were with the Mississauga Steelheads, got traded to Peterborough Petes as, kind of like a good ad for a Memorial Cup playoff run. Then from the Petes, got traded to the Saginaw Spirit for the same thing, excelled there. Obviously, the production may not be as high, but I really do think that he's going to be transitioning very well to the pro level because of the work ethic, because of his tendencies, and the ability to be a smart player on both sides of the puck. So I really think he's going to have a strong season with the Laval Rocket this year.
Yeah, I see that too. I'm gonna pick Jacob Fowler. I mean, say he probably had a breakout season this past season, but I think he's gonna have another one and further impress that he's gonna be the goaltender for sure, the goaltender of the future for the Canadiens. And going into his sophomore season, how much better can he get from what he did in his freshman season? I think you're going to see a lot more because the development just going to keep going. And yeah, I see another great season from him. All right, moving to impact in the NHL, there's a lot of prospects that could be on the team. And again, a very obvious one, but we will leave him. And I'm sure everyone knows who we're talking about. But Peter, who do you see making an impact in the NHL this season? And we'll leave Lane Hutson off the table.
Oh man, I was actually going to pick Lane Hutson as a result.
We could, and then we can move into the discussion.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? I'm going to say Joshua Roy, just so that we don't pick the obvious answer because we know how good Lane Hudson's going to be.
Yeah.
But, considering the fact that he's progressed very, very well, the fact that he got some of that NHL time this season, I think he's going to be very productive and provide that element of being a power forward type player on the Habs. I know they got quite a few, but I think this is one that has a little bit more skill and upside as a result of that. So I'm going to take Joshua Roy.
4 goals in the NHL this past season, 23 games, I believe. I closed his window, of course. 23 games, so I remember. So there you go. My memory's not that bad. Yeah, I that was my pick. Joshua Roy was going to be mine. So I'll go Sean Farrell because I think he's going to have a really good season wherever he is. I don't know if he's going to be in the NHL. He did have some games, too. Dayton, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, Lane Hutson is going to make it, right? And we don't
Yeah.
have to pretend that we're avoiding him because, and the comments that you made reminded me of a broadcast I was watching for the World Juniors when Connor Bedard was like the center of attention. And the host, I don't remember her name, but she asked Craig Button, I think it was Craig Button, who besides Bedard do you want to pay attention to on this team? And Craig says, Connor Bedard, and Connor Bedard. And I just had to put my head in my hands because the question was who other than Bedard? He's like maybe you're putting a little bit too much pressure on the kid.
Yeah.
So there are other Canadians who have a chance to make the NHL this year. I think David Reinbacher has a fantastic chance. I think a more unexpected player who has a chance is Logan Mailloux, who had a fantastic rookie season in the AHL, 47 points in 72 games. Let me just confirm where that ranked because my assumption was correct. He was first among defensemen on the Laval Rocket. That's points that you'd expect if you sent an NHLer down to the minor leagues. He's got the NHL size. He was producing everywhere he went. Yes, there are the concerns. He seems to have moved past that. And hopefully he's learned from that. And I think that there is something to be said about that as well. His opportunity seems to be right in front of him. Given that right shot, I think he could secure an NHL spot sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think definitely, yeah, I agree. All right, moving to Lane Hutson. He's going to be in his first full season in the NHL, assuming. I mean, I don't think he's going to be in the AHL. Had a great debut and also was really good in the games that he played. Had his first points, didn't score, but he had some points and looked like an NHL player. So, Peter, do you see him challenging for the Calder Trophy? Because yes, there's a lot of names. Logan Stankoven being a big one. Macklin Celebrini, Maverick Bourque could enter the conversation. We'll talk more about this later on, but could Lane Hutson enter that conversation? Much harder to do as a defenseman, especially when there's so much high-end forwards in the mix.
Short answer, yes. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And you kind of look towards like what you're not trying to compare. I'm not trying to compare him to what Quinn Hughes did in his rookie season, but look what he did. He was, a very fantastic rookie for that season, believe he won rookie of the year that year in his first season.
Cale Makar did.
Oh, Cale Makar. Okay. Okay. So he was on the all rookie team. So yeah. There we go. Thank you for correcting that because
lots going on. I hate it. That's why I know.
Lots going on, but you know what? It is what it is. But obviously their similarities are there. Undersized, but very dynamic as a result. And, I really think that he really can challenge for that award. I don't know if he's going to win it because of that forward depth, but he's definitely going to make his mark and throw his name into the conversation. I mean, also look what Luke Hughes did this season as well. Funny how I'm talking about all the Hughes brothers, but yeah, I think if we're also going to do like a projection, I don't know if he'll reach Quinn Hughes's mark at the 50-point mark. It's possible, but as a safe bet, I really do think that 40 points could be possible. That he might even be setting a bit of a high expectation, but considering that, there's the size factor, but doesn't seem to be a factor to his game. He's very elusive as a result. So who knows what's going to happen, but I think minimum 40 points, I think would be a really good, solid rookie season for Lane Hutson.
Yeah, I think he'll be in that range. I mean, he looked like he didn't have any problems adjusting to the NHL level when he played those few games at the end of the season. I didn't see him. He was dynamic. Yes, I think he played 2 of the games against the Red Wings. So I don't know what other teams he's going to play against to see how he plays. But yeah, the Red Wings aren't a bad team. But Dayton, do you see the same thing? Is he challenged for the Calder? What type of point projection do you got for him?
Oh, definitely. I think he's going to be a consideration for the Calder the whole season. I was just looking at Cale Makar's stats from when he came into the NHL. So he had, just to kind of quickly run through this, he had 10 games in the playoffs, 6 points, only 1 goal. In the NCAA before coming over, he had 49 points, 16 goals, 41 games. Lane Hutson had 2 assists in 2 games, so a better point per game production, smaller sample size. He had 49 points, 15 goals in 38 games. So he's producing at the NCAA level, top schools. Cale Makar was UMass. Lane Hutson was Boston University. He's producing more than Makar. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be better than Makar, but Makar came into his first full season and put up 50 points in 57 games. I think that's well within in Hutson's wheelhouse. And if he hits that 50-point plateau, he's got probably rookie of the year in the bag, because that is, unless there's a forward who's dominant, and we haven't seen that in a number of years, 50 points for a defenseman will win you the Calder Trophy. So there's my bold early season prediction.
Unless a guy like Bedard's in your
True.
Yeah.
Because Brock Faber closed. Did Faber get 50 points? My gosh, I didn't look that up. I know it was close. I think he had 40 plus, but and he didn't win it.
Yep. You got to hit 50.
Yep.
Got to hit 50.
47 points. Very short, but he did earn a lot of minutes and played a lot of big key situations. Yeah. So that's the reason why he could have closed the gap very quickly.
How many did Moritz Seider score in 21-22?
Seider scored.
50. He scored 50.
Yeah, sure, yeah. You have to hit 50 points.
Yeah. That's the mark.
That's the mark.
There you go. So if Hutson gets 50 points, he'll have a really good chance of winning the Calder. But yeah, this is going to be a really fun group, a Calder Trophy watch this season, because there's a lot of good names involved in this one. So yeah, and Hutson will be part of it too. All right. Well, there's the Montreal Canadiens prospect pool, a very solid one and a very high-end one. I don't know where he's going to drop where they're going to drop in the farm system rankings when Logan Reed updates them, but I think they're going to be in the top 5. I think it's a pretty solid bet for that. But we'll move on to our next team next week. But thanks, Peter. Thanks, Dayton, for coming on the show and talking Montreal Canadiens prospects. Make sure to check out everything at thehockeywriters.com with prospects, with all of our coverage that we have coming out. But until our next episode, we'll see you on another episode of Prospect Corner.